Welcome to an Azure Incident Retrospective. I'm David Steele.
And I'm Simon Kuba. We both work in the Azure Communications team.
In addition to providing a written post-incident review after major outages on the Azure platform, we also host these retrospective conversations.
You're about to watch a recording of a live stream. We invited impacted customers through Azure Service Health and Azure Service Health Alerts to participate in a live webcast featuring our relevant engineering leaders.
By joining one of our live sessions, customers and partners also had access to a Q&A experience to ask questions of our engineering experts during the event.
As you know, building reliable applications in the cloud is a shared responsibility. So this conversation includes our learnings at Microsoft, as well as guidance for our customers and partners to make their services more resilient.
We hope you enjoy the conversation that follows, and we really welcome feedback on how we can make these sessions even better. So feel free to scan the QR code below the recording for our 2.5 question survey.
Super. Today's focus retirement is related to Azure Storage. We're retiring GPv1, that's our general purpose V1 storage accounts. And from October the 13th this year, we're going to explain what's going to happen. The retirement will start and there will be impact to customers, but not in the traditional sense of like data plane impact or anything, but there could be some billing related issues as well.
So to talk us through the upcoming retirement, I'd like to introduce an engineering leader joining as our guest. To my right-hand side, George Trussell. George is our Senior Product Manager from the Azure Storage team. Thank you for being here to help talk us through it.
Thank you for having me.
Super. George, before we get into this particular thing itself with storage, could you talk us through why storage needs to make these changes, why we're retiring this type of storage account, and what's involved?
Yes, so the reason why we're doing this is we need to help customers modernize their storage fleet. There's a lot of advantage actually to doing this retirement for customers. When you move from GPv1 to GPv2, you get a lot of additional features. So you get tiering, you get things like additional redundancies. You also get like all the account limits that we now have on GPv1 storage. So there's a lot of advantages and a lot of security updates that come with GPv2 that you're not going to get with a GPv1 account today. So modernization and simplification of the products for customers.
That's a great motivating reason here. Would you talk us through, obviously the storage account's a really critical construct here. So what else does that impact? And can you give us a little bit more specifics around GPv1 and the features therein, and GPv2 and why that's kind of better or more versatile for customers?
So yeah, so GPv1 doesn't have, like I said, doesn't have the concept of a tier. So you have general storage. With GPv2, you have the ability or concept of a tier. So as data ages, as it gets less accessed, you can actually move it down to lower cost storage tiers like cool, cold, and potentially even archive. So the ability to retain that data better at a cost that's more acceptable for long-term storage is a really key advantage for customers to move from GPv1 to GPv2. So yeah, there's that as well.
So, George, I remember it was a long time ago. Yep. It's about 10 years ago. I was reading, it was an article published by another cloud provider, and they wrote 10 lessons learned from 10 years of doing the cloud. And I couldn't tell you all the lessons, but the one that stood out to me, and this is me remembering 10 years ago, was they said APIs are forever. And I remember the idea of saying, it had a profound impact to think, once you build something, once we as a cloud provider provide something for our customers, people start building systems on top of systems. Yep. And so a retirement can almost feel like we're whipping the rug out from under them, yep. and it means we're breaking stuff. And while it's not an outage in the traditional sense, it can cause impact. What are we doing to make sure the customers are not surprised?
So that's a really good, interesting point there. So with GPv1, you get all of those same features in GPv2. So you're not losing anything. You're actually gaining a lot more things in GPv2 than you are with GPv1. So that API doesn't change for you. Your endpoints don't change, which is another great point for customers, right? I mean, they don't want things changing in the background. All that changes for customers is the billing model and the account kind storage. So GPv1 is account kind storage, GPv2 is account kind storage v2. So they're the two things that really change. Everything else is an additional built on. So when we built GPv2, we took GPv1 as that foundation and then added stuff on from that afterwards. So everything you can do today, you can do in GPv2.
It's cool that the APIs aren't changing. That piece is very important. So what are the things that we can do to make sure customers aren't surprised by something like this? It seems like quite a material change.
Yes, it is quite a big material change. So the things that we've been doing is we've been doing regular email blasts on communication. So if you're a subscription owner, you would have received a notification regularly from me that this is happening. There's Azure updates. So when the retirement went live in October, last year, An Azure update went out. They're a great place to go and understand what's happening in retirements. It also went into our Azure retirement workbook on the portal. So all of our retirements are actually in our Azure workbook portal. So it's a great place to go and understand what retirements are happening and how that affects you. So if there's any products in your subscription that are affected by retirement, it will show you all of those products and all of the things that are affected by that. There's a banner, so if you go to your storage account, you'll see that there's a GPV1 banner saying that it's being retired. So we try and put data in as much places and as many places as we can to try and catch customers early and easily.
That's great that we're kind of talking about it on everywhere we can to make sure that people aren't caught unawares. I mean, I know in a moment we'll talk a little bit through what customers can do and some actions that customers can take, but what if they don't? What if despite all of the warnings and all of the banners and all of the communications, if a customer chooses to do nothing, what happens come 13th of October?
So to give customers the best experience, and we understand at Azure that retirements they're a heavy lift for customers. So what we're going to do in this retirement is actually do an auto migration for customers. So if you don't do anything with your storage accounts or you don't realize that you've got some around, we're going to actually auto migrate them from GPV1 to GPV2 for you. And that's an Azure thing. That's something that we're going to do and take on ourselves. And that again just helps customers with that heavy lifting. You know, if they've got lots of accounts, then you know, this is just a way to give customers the best experience they can have.
And there might be some customers who are perfectly happy to learn that and say, great, I don't need to do anything. Correct. But there might be some customers, depending on their scenario, where that's not the right thing to happen.
So every customer should evaluate their estate and should understand their workflows. So the main thing that would drive a customer to go do that auto migration is two things. One, if they have a very heavy transactional workflow on GPV1, we highly recommend you go and understand that workflow and go and evaluate it against GPV2, because the billing change between GPV1 and GPV2 is mostly on transactions. So if you are a heavy transaction workflow user, we highly recommend you go and understand what that impact is and give yourself time to do any changes to your application or your workflow to optimize for GPV2. And that's about it.
Makes sense.
It's great that we're not breaking customers, because typically with retirements, a lot of the times if customers don't do something, we stop supporting it. So it's cool to see that we're going to migrate and customers should watch out for billing. You and I were talking earlier, and we were talking about what customers can actually do and click through, because sometimes docs can be okay, so on. And you said, look, you've made one earlier. So, and so I was wondering if you could walk us through what customers can actually do in almost near real time.
Yeah, so here's I went through and helped customers create an Azure policy. So we've got one that we've created earlier here. So we'll walk through that here right now in a second. So this scales from one account to tens of accounts, hundreds of accounts. So we'll see that we'll migrate tens of accounts on this demo. So just going to start off by just showing you, picking out one of my accounts here, just showing you that it's a GPV1 account. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually migrate this in place. So I'm going to go use an Azure policy to do that. So I'm going to make Azure do the heavy lifting for me. So we'll start off by creating a definition. So the definition is basically what the policy is going to do. So I'll start off by selecting my subscription. So I only have one subscription here, but you can select it to a per subscription or lots of subscriptions. So again, let Azure do the heavy lifting. Just going to put in a quick name so that I know what it is when I go back to it. And then we'll just put in, again, a quick description. So category, because we're working with storage, we're going to go and look for an existing one. So we're actually going to go look for the storage category, because we're working with storage. And then we'll just scroll down. So I'm going to copy and paste what's called a deploy if not exists. So it's going to look for all of my existing GPV1 accounts, and it's going to override that with a GPV2 account. So again, nothing's going to change. It's going to do an in-place upgrade for me, but it's going to go look through for all of those accounts. So now I'm going to just go and assign that to a policy. So the definition defines what it does, and the policy allows us to run that and do that audit of those accounts.
And so right now we haven't changed anything. We're just creating a policy.
Just creating the policy, just allowing the system to be able to run and essentially audit my subscription here.
Okay, all right. So once you have your policy, what's on? We've created this policy now.
Yep. So just give it a second, so we'll just let it refresh. There you go. So you can see we've created that assignment. So we'll just double check that everything's working in there. So now what we'll go do is we'll let that policy run for a few minutes. We'll let it find all those accounts. So you can see it's picked up, in the magic of time, it's picked up 20 of my accounts are non-compliant. So I've got 20 GPV1 accounts in this subscription.
But it hasn't done anything to them.
No, it's not done anything. All it's done is done an audit, and it's just identified all of those accounts for me. So you can see, there's our GPV1 demo account. So you can see it's non-compliant. So again, nothing has changed so far. All it's done is just tell me what's in my subscription. So it helps you find in your larger state, it helps you find all those individual accounts.
If you had 1 million, it would show you 1 million results. Okay.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
So what I'm going to do now is the remediation task. So this is actually going to go out and evaluate all of those accounts and see, can I actually upgrade this from GPV1 to GPV2? Now, depending on how many accounts you have, that's going to take a little while to churn through. But it's very much, at this point, you could walk away and let it run. But what we're going to do is just show you that task is running, and then we'll show you.
So this is assessing now?
Yep, so now it's assessing, so you can see it's in progress. So it's going to evaluate what it can do with those accounts.
Okay.
Like I said, it's going to do an in-place upgrade, which means endpoints don't change, account doesn't move, we don't touch the data, and we're not going to do anything that would put customer data at risk. So the GPV1 to GPV2 upgrade is a zero downtime upgrade.
So even if someone's using that storage account, it's being used in real time by whatever reason, it's just going to be a momentary
blip.
Okay.
It's worst case scenario, it's a momentary blip.
Wonderful.
So we can now see it's complete. So it's actually upgraded all of those accounts that it found to GPV2. So from my perspective, I didn't have to do anything other than write a policy and let it run and do the remediation task.
And people can use that policy that you had there
Yes.
and just deploy it to their own environments. They
Yes.
don't just customize that at all.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. If only the dentist was this pleasant. That would be wonderful.
Yes, so now you can see it's upgraded to a GPV2 account. Again, it's done it in place. So none of my data has been touched. So again, another way of making Azure do the work for you.
That's great. I mean, I'm looking at it, I'm trying to think through, might it make sense for some customers to go in and start doing this now, right? This is basically just saying, don't auto-upgrade me on the 13th of October. Well, there are benefits that they might start getting now, or they might look at like you were talking about in terms of the high transaction users, they might say, no, actually, I'm going to wait until October 13th for now.
Yes, yeah, this is a great way of basically understanding what's in your estate and understanding that potential impact. If customers want to do in-place upgrades, I mean, when the customers that I've been speaking to, I've always said, work with your end customers. I always say and recommend use a small maintenance period, right? The chances of anything happening is tiny. This code's been out for years. It's well trodden. We've already migrated millions of accounts so far today, but you never know what happens, right? So obviously work with your own customers. I always, like I said, use a maintenance window so that people know that something's happening. So should anything happen, everyone is prepared and you can pick up the phone and call and get support with that account. But I don't expect that to ever happen.
I bet. I mean, it's cool to see. Obviously, you would want to use Azure policy if you need to do this across dozens or hundreds of thousands of accounts. If that's a little too involved for people, are there other ways that you can figure out which of your accounts are using GPV1? I know you mentioned Advisor earlier, but also Azure Resource Graph. What are some of the options for customers to look into that?
There's an ARG query on our retirement page. So if you search for GPV1 retirement and look on our learn pages, there's an example ARG query in there that people can copy and paste into their account. It's going to show you what you have access to. So obviously, if there's other accounts in your subscription that you don't have access to, it's not going to bring them up. But it is a nice, again, easy way of finding all of that data in your storage account to identify what you need to migrate.
Good, and we've still got a few months on the clock. So
Yes,
no
you do
time
have
like
a
the
few
present.
months on the clock still.
Very
so.
good. And Sammy, how do we notify customers about this? I hope this isn't the first time that customers are hearing about this. George mentioned, we send comms on it, but what does that look like, or how should customers make sure that they can stay informed?
George has touched on a bunch of stuff. Typically for retirements, we actually have a huge leeway, and most of the time we give up to 3 years, which is an extraordinary amount of time.
Yes, this was 1 year notice.
This was less because the impact, as George has touched upon, is it's impactless. If nothing happens, if customers don't do anything, we don't delete those storage accounts,
Right.
we don't pause access to them, they just auto-resume. So this had a little bit less time. The things that I really like, absolutely, within Portal, those service health alerts, we tell customers in advance, hey, we're doing this thing. We put it in Advisor, we put the workbook. The important pieces when we're communicating to customers about retirements, which resources are impacted. And that's a huge thing, because imagine if we didn't have a world with resources and we said some of your storage accounts, customers would be scrambling to find out which one. So it's really important that we do that in the retirement workbook. That's there, in Advisor it's there. For enterprise customers who are really like the UI isn't for them, those ARG queries are going to be key in order to pull resources. There can be a small latency on them, but we're talking about hours. For some of them up to maybe 12 hours on some of those ARG queries. But it's for a 3-year window when we give those things, or 1 year in this case, I'm hoping that latency will be kind of short-lived, and
Sure.
yeah, it should be there.
So most of the time people should be aware of it. George, I know you've been working with lots of customers doing this. Any learnings from the coalface, or any final words of wisdom for customers thinking about their next steps?
Just prepare and evaluate, right? I mean, the last thing we want is a surprise bill. So please go and evaluate, and if you have the opportunity and the resources to migrate, please do. The more we can get onto GPV2, the better.
That's great, and then your customers can take advantages of all the good stuff that you mentioned.
Yes.
Thank you for watching another Azure Incident Retrospective. If this was your first time joining us, or you're interested in hearing about Azure Incident Communications generally, we're just going to run through some quick fundamentals here. Sammy and I are both from our Azure Communications team. We exist to tell our customers what's going on. We're not part of marketing. We're not part of our customer support team. We're really just a conduit between our various engineering teams involved on call during issues in explaining what's going on.
Absolutely. When we think about outages, we tend not to think about our competitors as being other cloud providers. We tend to think about our competitor in this sense being on premises, because when customers have an outage on premises, they typically know what's going on, they get updates, their leadership's involved. And so we've developed our communications philosophy in 5 areas that try and bridge that gap between on-premises and cloud. The first one is around speed. We need to tell customers quickly what's going on. The main area of this is with our AI ops. We call it Brain internally, and Brain can tell impacted customers what's going on within about 10 or 12 minutes to those impacted subscriptions. Typically speaking, we have about 70-80% coverage of our outages are onboarded into Brain, and we're constantly working to onboard more. The next one is around accuracy or granularity. It's really important that customers understand which of their resources are impacted. Telling customers that virtual machines in East US are impacted is not as helpful as telling them which of their virtual machines are impacted, and this is accessed through resource health. The third one is around discoverability. It's common practice that customers go to our public status page to look for incidents that impact them, when in reality, 99+% of the time, we speak to impacted customers through the portal in Azure Service Health. Customers are able to configure service health alerts that plug into PagerDuty, OpsGenie, and so on. The fourth one is around parity. Not only parity of our hundreds of services across Azure to ensure that they behave and respond in the same way, but parity across our Microsoft cloud. We understand how important it is to have a continuous and predictable practice across all the cloud products that Microsoft offers. And the last one is around transparency. During an outage, we try and tell our customers exactly what we know in real time. And again, you've just witnessed an Azure Incident Retrospective where we believe that the transparent approach in understanding what happened is a key ingredient for building trust. All of those principles and philosophies can be captured in Azure Service Health, where customers can understand which of their resources are impacted, get those Brain alerts firing to their subscriptions, set up service health alerts, and get invites to Azure Incident Retrospectives along with post-incident reviews following an outage.
That's right. That's how we kind of think about our comms philosophy. To apply it in practice, I'll run through a quick anatomy of an outage, how you would expect to interact with communications before, during, and after an outage. So before an outage, it's really important, as Sammy mentioned, to configure that last mile delivery through Azure Service Health Alerts to tell the right people in your organization in the right way and in the right tools that make sense for them. Secondly, there's a lot of other monitoring that exists within Azure. You can configure Azure Resource Health Alerts if you want to know about every blip and pause that happens on a specific specific resource. We've got scheduled events to surface things within the VM, as well as a full suite of Azure Monitor to look at everything you could possibly want to observe about things that are going on with your Azure services here. We'll also touch invariably in these live stream sessions to talk about availability zones, site recovery, Chaos Studio for fault injection, storage redundancy options, all of these different features and services that you can take advantage of to build resilience into your applications and into your workloads on Azure. And lastly, beyond the specific architectural elements, we've got a bunch of guidance that's available through our docs and learn pages to talk about the cloud adoption framework to help your organization adopt the cloud, and even the well-architected framework to look specifically at individual workloads, including how you can make those more reliable. Lots of resource-specific guidance and advisor. This is just a small number of things that you can have a look at to help kind of remediate and improve your resilience gaps.
Wonderful. So now that customers have done those things before an outage, if we fast forward to during an outage, what's happening? Now, myself and the team, we're interested in building systems that scale. We understand that in order for us to tell millions of customers around the world what's happening with their resources, we have to build systems that scale. And so one of the ways we do this is by investing in areas where we democratize information. And what that means is whether you spend $1 billion a year on Azure or $1 a year on Azure, we're going to tell people the same thing. We also want to tell them in the same source of truth as well, which is why we rally around single sources of truth, both internally and externally as well. In addition, during an outage, we want to tell you not only what's going on that we know and have confirmed, but at times things that we don't know. We're still ruling out a change. We're still looking at data center. Something doesn't make sense. This mitigation was attempted and failed. We want to tell our customers everything that we know so that they can make decisions and how they do this. Now, during an outage, many customers raise support tickets, and sometimes that's a great idea, and other times it's not so. It's not the best use of time. It makes sense to open a support ticket when if you've set up an Azure site recovery, as David mentioned, and you need help failing over, that's a great time to leverage our technical support team. If you're just raising a support ticket to confirm that the impact that you're seeing matches the symptoms that you're reading in Azure Service Health or the public Azure status page, that's not a great use of your time or the use of the time from our tech support agents as well. A lot of the time, David and I get questions around how does Microsoft respond to outages? How does Azure respond to outages? And generally speaking, we have about 3 categories. The first one is we kind of call them expected outages. We expect VMs to blip. We expect them to go down from time to time. It's not common practice. We have a multiple line SLA, but we do expect these things to happen. When this does happen, we respond appropriately. The ones that we kind of call unexpected is when we might lose an entire zone, and we might see multiple servers impacted in that zone. And typically speaking, we have a response profile for that. But really where things get unacceptable, and we kind of call it whoa, and it's a bit egregious, is when there's multi-zone or multi-region impact. This is really hard for customers to architect against. And so as a response profile to this, in addition to publishing a post-incident review within 14 days, we also try and get something out within 3 days so that customers know what we know so far. But also this is when we run the incidents like we've just had now with an Azure incident retrospective, so you can hear directly from our leaders what happened and navigate some of the complexity. And it's a great opportunity to ask our SMEs questions in real time about how the issue impacted your own environment and some of the steps that you can take perhaps to be resilient to those types of things.
That's right. So mileage varies depending on what kind of outage we're talking about here. We're starting to get into a little bit this after outage world. And as we pivot around to our learnings and our post-incident reviews, we really want to be quite intentional about how we learn from incidents and how we talk about that learning. That's why we try to resist the urge to talk about a root cause. We're not looking for one thing that went wrong. With massive distributed systems, we're looking for all of the different contributing factors that had to line up for customers to experience the impact they did. We want to learn from all of those. So we're not just looking for one thing. We also try to resist framing anything as human error, right? If a human or an operator made a mistake, that's a signal to us that our systems didn't provide that operator with the right intelligence, or that our systems lack the right safeguards to prevent that person from being able to cause customer impact. In a similar vein, we want to resist blaming the person at the keyboard. We know that we can't fire our way to become more reliable, and actually we want to encourage this culture of people to speak up when something bad is happening. Our engineers, and especially our leaders, need to know that we want to have a blame seamless retrospective and rally around trying to improve the situation as quickly as possible. We want to resist "I told you so," but as we've talked about a little bit in this session, customers have a role to play in the shared responsibility model. And so we want to use outages as a way to educate customers about decisions and trade-offs, about the different resilient services that you could use to try to have something be less impactful for you next time that it happens. We want to resist the urge to reassure customers an incident won't happen again. We always talk about what could we do to make this kind of thing less likely or less impactful, but it's inherently, it's probabilistic here. Sometimes outages look really similar, but actually involve very different failure modes. And lastly, we want to resist the urge to tell the perfect story. Our outages aren't TED Talks. They don't start with once upon a time and end with they all lived happily ever after. We actually want to embrace ambiguity and encourage everybody to have a conversation about topics that we don't have the answers for, and where we're still trying to figure out the right path forward or the right way to improve things. That's a really important part of the story. We don't want to gloss over that. So across all of these different areas, we really want to make sure that we're learning from incidents in quite an intentional way, and this is how we show up to you in the Azure Incident Retrospectives when we have these conversations with our engineering leaders. A couple of links on screen here to make sure that you have access to our previous recordings, as well as a way to get invited to future sessions. So thank you for joining us for this incident retrospective, and we hope you learned a little bit more about how incident communications works on the Azure platform. Thank you.